From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Secretary Chao, Mr. Hastings, Senator McConnell, members of Congress, Ms. Compton, distinguished guests, good evening. Specifically, aloha to students and faculty of the University of Hawaii watching via live stream, at the William Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and the Imiloa Astronomy Center at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. Also, a special greeting to Peace Corps volunteers at viewing parties in Belize, Guatemala, Jamaica, Tonga, and Fiji, and to other volunteers around the world. I'm Ted Widmer, director of the Kluge Center. On behalf of the Library of Congress, it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening as we continue a wonderful 5-year collaboration with the Daniel K. Inouye Institute to commemorate the life, legacy, and values of the late Senator Daniel Inouye. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Also, please note this event is being live streamed and recorded for the library's website. And if you have a question this evening, you are giving the library permission to use your question for future broadcast, as in forever. So please ask your question clearly, and please ask only one question. And for those of you who are tweeting this event, we're using the hashtag Inouye and hashtag Kluge. Senator Daniel K. Inouye was an Olympian figure here in Washington and in his home state of Hawaii. Born in Honolulu on September 7th, 1924 to Japanese-American parents, he graduated from high school less than 6 months after Pearl Harbor. After the ban was lifted on Japanese-Americans serving their country, he enlisted in the Army and served in the famous 442nd Regiment of the U.S. Army, a unit of Japanese-American soldiers who fought with extraordinary gallantry in Italy, France, and Germany. On October 21, 1945, in the war's final weeks in Europe, he was severely wounded in battle after taking out 2 German machine gun nests and lost his right arm. He returned home with a Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star Medal, 2 Purple Hearts, and 12 other medals and citations. He received extensive medical treatment, and his commitment to bipartisanship may have stemmed from the lifelong friendship he formed with another wounded veteran in the same hospital, the future Senator Bob Dole of Kansas. After coming home, he graduated from the University of Hawaii, then law school, and became Hawaii's first representative in 1959 when Hawaii became a state. 3 years later, he was elected senator, part of a freshman class inspired by the young President John F. Kennedy, including his brother, Edward Kennedy, Birchby, and George McGovern. He served for nearly half a century in the Senate, leaving a rich legacy that includes the National Museum of the Native American just down the street, and prominent service on the Senate Watergate Committee, the Senate Iran-Contra Committee, and the Senate Appropriations Committee, which he chaired from 2009 to 2012. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor on June 1, 2000 for his military service, a day I was proud to be in the audience at the White House. After his death on December 17, 2012, he was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, becoming the first senator to receive both the Medal of Freedom and the Medal of Honor. Tonight, the John W. Kluge Center at the Library of Congress and the Daniel K. Inouye Institute present the third in a 5-year distinguished lecture series to commemorate Daniel Inouye's commitment to bipartisanship, moral courage, public service, and civic engagement. We also celebrate tonight another great American who believed in courage and civic engagement, President John F. Kennedy, born 100 years ago this month. This year's lecture was planned in collaboration with the Kennedy Center and the Peace Corps to focus on values held dear by both President Kennedy and Senator Inouye. It was also designed to honor the special role of Hawaii in the development of the Peace Corps. As the panels outside indicate, more than 7,500 volunteers were trained in Hawaii between 1962 and 1972. This evening, our speakers will consider the topic of inspiring a sense of service and idealism. They will highlight the evolution of the Peace Corps, which was established by President Kennedy on March 1, 1961, and discuss how its ideals remain relevant today, 5 decades later. The event is made possible by a generous donation from the Daniel K. Inouye Institute. We are most privileged to have with us this evening the Senator's widow, the driving force behind his legacy, Mrs. Irene Inouye. I ask you please to join me in recognizing her. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce our distinguished panelists. As you will hear, the Peace Corps played a significant role in both of their lives. Reed Hastings grew up locally. His father was an attorney for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare under President Nixon. One of his early memories, according to an interview he gave in the New York Times, is getting a tour of Camp David from the then Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, and noticing that Camp David had golden toilet seats. There were no such amenities in the Peace Corps, where he served from 1983 to 1985 after attending Bowdoin College. He taught math in a high school in northwest Swaziland, where there was no electricity at all. But it could be said that Netflix began there. He took his GRE exam in Swaziland. He was then admitted to Stanford's program in computer science. He enjoyed a very successful business career. He created and sold a software company, always displaying the versatility and self-reliance prized by the Peace Corps. That background prepared him well for the day he received a late fee from a video store after renting the movie Apollo 13. He was in fact 6 weeks late and owed $40, and on the spot, he decided to create a new company for people who wanted to rent movies for longer than one day. Netflix was founded in 1997 as a DVD subscription service. 10 years later, in 2007, it started streaming content via the internet. It now has over 100 million members in over 190 countries, more than the population of Germany, France, or England. Reed is an active educational philanthropist. He served on the California State Board of Education from 2000 to 2004. He's on the board of many educational organizations, including the California Charter Schools Association, Dreambox Learning, the KIPP Foundation, Pahara, and the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley. He's also a board member of Facebook and was on the board of Microsoft from 2007 to 2012. Our other panelist, Secretary Elaine Chao, is the 18th U.S. Secretary of Transportation. At the age of 8, she immigrated from Taiwan to the United States, speaking no English. She graduated from high school in New York, Mount Holyoke, and Harvard Business School, then began a remarkable public career that has always given inspiration to others. From 2001 to 2009, she was the 24th U.S. Secretary of Labor, the first Asian American woman to be appointed to the cabinet in American history. Prior to that, she was the president and CEO of United Way of America, and before that, the Deputy Secretary of Transportation. And she was the director of the Peace Corps from 1991 to 1993, an eventful period in world history, and especially for the countries in the former Soviet Union. She was nominated for that post by President George H.W. Bush, and during her tenure, she developed one of President Kennedy's original ideas for the Peace Corps, which is that it should operate in the Eastern European countries where development and expression were often stifled. Under her leadership, the Peace Corps expanded into Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Our conversation tonight will be moderated by Ann Compton, former ABC News White House correspondent. She joined ABC News in 1973. She's covered 7 presidents. On September 11th, 2001, she was the only broadcast reporter allowed to remain on Air Force One during the dramatic hours when President Bush was unable to return here to Washington. She's traveled around the globe through all 50 states with presidents, vice presidents, and first ladies. We're delighted she can be here with us tonight. After their conversation, we will allot some time for questions, but first we will begin the Q&A with some video-recorded questions from Peace Corps volunteers and University of Hawaii students. Then we'll have microphones available and we will take a few questions from the live audience. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists to the stage.
Thank you.
Good evening, aloha. During the questioning tonight and the conversation between these two guests, We're looking for that thread that goes between public service and the idea that the rest of our collective experiences lead into that and can illuminate that. Elaine Chao, I've known you since we were both young girls covering the Reagan administration. She actually brought her spouse tonight, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell here. They got married much after Elaine and I had first met. Thank you for coming. Secretary Chao, you began as a banker.
Yes?
And you, your first government job was a White House fellow. How did you get from there then into a cabinet position? And what was that thread that got you to head the Peace Corps?
The thread is curiosity. As you've heard, I'm an immigrant to this country. I didn't understand so much about America. So when I was a banker, I thought, I was involved in a number of transactions. If it was with the private sector, it would just be 4 people. Myself, the banker, the borrower, and most of the time it was a he, his lawyer, my lawyer, and we'd be able to finish a deal in 2 hours. But whenever I did a government deal, there would be reams of documents, 35 lawyers on their side, the government side, and it took like months to close a deal. So I was kind of curious. Why did this happen? Why the difference? And so I heard about the White House Fellowship Program, and I applied. But it was out of a sense of love for this country, curiosity about how our government functioned, and wanting to understand the larger society here in America.
And then you had been in a deputy cabinet position. How did the Peace Corps rise out of that? And I remember what happened in 1991, the year that you took over the Peace Corps, because I remember missing Christmas with our 4 little children.
Oh.
It was the day the Soviet Union fell apart,
Right.
and President George Herbert Walker Bush flew from Camp David to the White House on Christmas night to address the nation and congratulate Gorbachev for having the courage to break up the Soviet Union. You now have a Peace Corps. There were no Peace Corps representatives on the ground in those countries.
Yes, President George H.W. Bush was actually quite prescient, and he had a very good feel for world affairs. So in the summer of 1991, he already had a feeling that the collapse, I think, because we've never talked about it in this sense, and I'll explain, but he must have had a sense that the former Soviet Union was going to collapse and that the peoples in the former Soviet Union will need help from a people-to-people kind of exchange, but they'll require different skill sets. They will require a more sophisticated kind of assistance. And so I was in California in June of 1991, and he mentioned his interest in placing me at Peace Corps. And he said the peoples of the Soviet Union, if this ever came about, would need assistance in adjusting to a more industrialized and to join the community, the international community, if anything like that were to happen. And I have to give my husband some credit. He wasn't my husband then. I was just going out with him. But he was cute. He still is. So I discussed it with him, and he was very encouraging of my entering the Peace Corps as a director.
Wonderful. Reed Hastings. So you graduate from Bowdoin. You're going to go into the Marine Corps. How did that turn into the Peace Corps and then into an legendary entrepreneurial career?
Well, I wanted to do some form of service, and the Marine Corps has a program where you can do summers at Quantico, and then when you graduate, you get commissioned as a second lieutenant. So I did the junior year, I guess, summer, and it was hard. So I realized, the system is very well organized and very impressive, but, as a junior person, it's following orders a lot. And I realized that might not be my sweet spot. And so I was able to petition out of that and then join the Peace Corps, where you're sent to many distant places and you really have to make it up as you go along. And it really develops your leadership muscle in that way.
Did you get to pick where you were going?
No, I got assigned Swaziland. This is all pre-internet, and so you go to your local library and you look up an encyclopedia. I'd never heard of the place, but like many of the places in the world that Peace Corps volunteers are sent, it's a very optimistic people, and I was a high school math teacher and just had a fantastic experience.
Well, let me switch to this. Reed, you live in California, Silicon Valley. Many of the students watching in Hawaii from 2 locations. The Washington Beltway seems like a strange creature and probably not at times a very appealing one. Do you think, from your point of view, can you explain how you view Washington and whether a public service career at this moment probably doesn't look that appetizing to some young people?
I think it looks appetizing to many people, and whether it's Washington or Sacramento for us in California. Some people choose a life like the secretary that's dedicated to public service decade after decade, and I think that's very powerful because you develop a lot of skills and connections and you can be more effective. Other people like myself dabble in it, so 2 years in the Peace Corps, then I'm in the private sector. Then I volunteered on the State Board of Education in California, so I spent a lot of time in Sacramento.
You became chairman, president.
That's right, but you're basically supporting the professionals, like the secretary, that are dedicating their lives. And so as long as you realize different people make different choices, and that's okay, and you work together, I think there's a lot of different opportunities to either do, I'll call it, small tier occasional service like I've done and mostly focus on the private sector, or long-term in many different roles like the secretary.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's really important, actually, to have these different paths into public service at federal, state, local levels. I think our nation benefits when people have a diversity of experience in the private sector, in the volunteer sector, and they come into the public sector. All of that is helpful.
And from the point of view of the students who are watching tonight from Hawaii, should they worry about being put off if they see Washington looking chaotic right now?
Democracy is chaotic. Democracy is messy. So it's really funny. I teach English to some immigrants from Asia, and they keep on asking me, they keep on saying, like, who's in charge? And I tell them, there's nobody in charge. But then they say, you and I know each other now well enough, you can really tell me who's in charge in America. So the dynamic aspects of our society and the balance of power between the different branches at the federal level, I mean, making laws is like making sausage. It is messy. Democracy is messy. We have such a cacophonous nation of people. People talk about partisanship, gridlock. Our country is made up of, our Congress is made up of representatives, senators and congressmen, who represent where they're from. And they're giving voice to their people, the people that they represent.
And who sent them there?
Who sent them there. So we have such a diverse country. So of course, our national discourse and our dialogue is going to be kind of chaotic and messy as well. But that's democracy.
Let me ask both of you, how do you express that to the people, the young Peace Corps volunteers are out there dealing with? Reed, do you have stories about when you were again, about ways in which people's lives were changed because you were there, and Secretary Chao, for you as well, ways in which you know that during your tenure, lives were changed in places overseas?
Yeah, absolutely. The Peace Corps and many things similar to it are great experiences to just grow a sense of the world. It's inevitable that if you grow up in the U.S. and don't get a chance to travel, as most of us don't, that you have one view of the world. And once you've lived outside the U.S. for a while, And you just see how broad it is and the wonderful nature of people around the world. It's a very powerful experience. And so I just felt, very connected to everyone. And again, times may look chaotic today, but, they're not really that chaotic compared to World War II or the Civil War or the 13 years before we had a Constitution, the first 13 years of the Republic. So, you have to have some perspective. And you might also look at it and say, in difficult times is when the service is most needed and most valuable. So I certainly would encourage any young person to be involved and not think about, the last 20 years as, a turnoff of politics.
And were there times with some of the students and the residents that you dealt with that you felt you were able to make the connection that to help them better understand America? The 1980s were a different time, but not that different.
Yeah, but I think you really do it as a Peace Corps volunteer by example. It's not, giving lectures on the separation of powers or something. It's living your life in a rural area and being a decent person. And, for them, it breaks down the theory of what America is to make it very real and personal. And so the Peace Corps has always been about very personal touch. And with the Secretary's leadership around the world, I'm sure you got to visit many. I got one little slice of Swaziland, and you probably have a much broader view of it.
Well, Reed is so inspiring when he said what he said about the chaos. I mean, think about Civil War, 13 years before. And I didn't think about that, but that's really true. So when you ask about what's really, what differences I've seen, when I was director of the Peace Corps, and I went to visit all these Peace Corps volunteers, and when I would speak with Peace Corps volunteers, and there are some who are watching now, they tell me, and I feel it myself, that I've changed because I went to visit them. And there's some volunteers here from Tonga. I went to Tonga, and I was single at the time, so they gave me the wedding dress. It's like a straw mat that you wrap around yourself, and it was the wedding dress. And I'm sure the volunteers in Tonga understand this. And which were the other areas? American Samoa, did I hear? I was there as well. The hospitality of the local people is just overwhelming. Every single place I went, the tremendous outpouring of warmth toward Americans is just so impressive and inspiring.
And that personal one-on-one with residents may have a softening effect if politically a country is not as warm with the United States relationship as it. Did you ever have any instances where you worried or thought of bringing Americans home from a country?
We did. As the Peace Corps director, the first responsibility is to ensure the safety and security of the volunteers. So we indeed did withdraw Peace Corps volunteers from, I believe it was Pakistan at the time. We had a little problem there. But when I was Peace Corps director, one of the first things we did, which I was very proud of, was to have an emergency plan. It was kind of sad that we had to do this. But because Peace Corps volunteers are spread so far, it took about 3 days or even more to gather them together. And so the world was changing.
Were you able to airlift them out?
Oh my gosh, yes. And so we actually had instituted a plan which enabled us, the local Peace Corps office, to communicate with Peace Corps volunteers faster so that they can be congregated in one place for immediate evacuation if necessary.
One question that we heard from students who sent in their questions, and from some in the Peace Corps as well, asking whether the Peace Corps volunteers representing the United States around the world are representing of the diversity of the United States, of women, minorities. Was that an issue at all?
Absolutely.
And
I don't want to hog this because Reed is so interesting. But yes, absolutely. I think Peace Corps has a hard time recruiting. I don't know now, but 20 years ago when I was there, we had difficulty recruiting among people from communities of color. I mean, I'm Asian American. You know, my responsibilities to my family, I wanted to make sure that I was financially responsible. And the thought of taking 2 years off and not getting paid except for a very small stipend was just not an option for a lot of people in different communities. And so I don't think we should be surprised. I mean, that's just kind of like the differences in the cultural diversity that we have. But we also have to do a more affirmative job, a better job of making known what it's like to be a Peace Corps volunteer.
Reed, in your experience, especially when you come out, you are in the private sector now, are there good arguments for young people to get involved who might not be traditional Peace Corps candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great experience for someone who's pretty independent-minded. And one of the great things the U.S. government does is delay any student loan repayments during that time you're a Peace Corps volunteer.
Now explain that. I didn't realize that. That might
Yeah,
be
so
a big
factor.
factor.
Many of our students have built up debt to afford college, and then if you go in the Peace Corps, that debt is deferred for that time period. And then the Peace Corps is doing a better job of re-entry in skills development and things. So it's a remarkable program because it's now, about 50 years. Yeah. And if you think of most programs created, I don't know, the last 20 or 30 years, they get pretty partisan. They get associated with a political party. And the Peace Corps has really been a very bipartisan effort that has wide support. And, that's quite unique, really, in the last 100 years.
Let me broaden from that to a bigger aspect here. Both of you have worked, and you are currently in the private sector. What are the lessons that you from the private sector learn that are skills that you could take, that your Peace Corps volunteers during your tenure could use, and that skills that you took or think now you took with you? Let me start with you, Mr. Hastings. What the private sector skills that really can be employed when you're overseas in a position representing the United States like that?
Well, I would say embracing failure, because when you're 22 and 23 and you're on your own in a remote part of the world, you do a lot of stupid stuff. And, some of it works out, but, when I look at the misadventures, like this beekeeping project I started to do for local entrepreneurs, it didn't work out. But this other one, which was water tanks at the local high school, did. And so you just got to be willing, got to be relatively fearless and just try things. And I think that mindset of being, okay with some failure and being willing to try is tremendously helpful in the private sector.
As a former Secretary of Labor,
for
workforce...
For 8 years, right?
Yes.
All 8 years.
All 8 years. The workforce of the future is very interesting to me and very important to the country. I think what's really important now as we go into the future is that workers of the future have to be knowledge workers. And Reed is in the area of technology. Technology is changing so much the way we live and work and travel, because now I'm in transportation. But what's really important is the road to work that was so valued in the past is no longer valuable. What's most valuable is creativity, ingenuity, and the ability to think. So the Peace Corps volunteer experience is actually very helpful. It doesn't really matter if you want to, some people may say, well, I've never worked in the private sector before, how can this help? Every employer is looking for workers who have the ability to be curious, to learn, to adjust, be flexible, and to be creative and resourceful. And these are skills that if one can gain are very helpful in any kind of job in all three sectors, public, private, and also the nonprofit.
Well, and that, of course, the purpose of this program is to encourage young people to consider public service. Those are the kind of skills, the creativity, the thinking, to be able to write, to be able to imagine, which would be incredibly important for a public service job as well.
That's absolutely right. I mean, just pushing yourself to do things that are challenging, you know, whether it's banking and whether it's Peace Corps, you know, I think people learn the most when they're in challenging situations. And that's what then stimulates the most learning. Back to the Secretary's observation, it's continuous learning in our society today.
We had a question about private public partnerships in a time when government funds are limited, when Americans want government, some Americans want government to have a smaller role, at least want the private sector to pick up some of that. Where are those public-private partnerships important for this government now, for the country right now, and for the next generation of leaders coming along?
Well, in terms of, this is a very timely question, because this administration has as one of its top priorities the infrastructure, the deteriorating infrastructure of our country, and how we need to rebuild, refurbish, rehabilitate, repair the existing infrastructure. We do not have enough money as a country to be able to address all of the needs of the infrastructure through government funding alone. And we would not want to fund direct government funding on all these different projects because it would have a deleterious impact on our deficit and also potentially dislocate the private sector markets as well. There is a lot of private sector monies, resources that are available. And currently there are states and other places, municipalities, that prohibit the private sector from investing in public infrastructure. So there must be a way in which we can not discriminate against the private sector and allow them to participate in the rebuilding of our infrastructure.
A toll road, a bridge, what are some
So when
examples?
you have public-private partnerships, it's an effort by, for example, in the infrastructure project, the federal funding will probably be about $200 billion, and we will leverage that because a lot of times, just like seed capital, if you can get some government monies, the government monies is kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval, and it will attract and entice other resources to come in. So if of the $200 billion, there will be an opportunity to attract private sector funding through innovative ways in which you can incentivize the private sector to come in. So for example, just today, I just came from Atlanta, Georgia, to participate in the opening of I-25. It is a major artery in Atlanta, Georgia. The bridge on this I-25 on March 30th erupted in a huge fire that resulted in the collapse of this section of the bridge. This is a major artery in Atlanta, and it messed up traffic. But through, it's not a public-private partnership, but through incentivizing the private sector, this project came in under budget, ahead of schedule, and in basically 7 weeks, it was able to rebuild this section of the bridge. And now Georgians are able to be on the move again.
Silicon Valley anxious to help on public-private partnerships? And of course, your involvement in education in the state of California is legendary.
You know, some of the most exciting stuff in the private partnerships is things like the private rocket ship efforts, which you never would have thought 10 years ago that several different private companies would be developing rockets and doing amazing things at amazing efficiency. And then we have self-driving cars, and you know, over the next 5 or 10 years, that's going to be a tremendous revolution in you know, how we all get around and people's relationship with cars. So all these different sectors are in the education side. People are doing web-based learning and augment what's happening in a classroom to provide more individualized instruction. And so we're seeing the role of technology in multiple different sectors where, you know, maybe a long time ago it was mostly from the government.
want to ask both of you, before we go to questions from the audience, a little bit about leadership, because there are students in Hawaii tonight, and there are students in the audience here, and those who will be able to see this online. And they're always looking for some kind of key of what makes great leadership. And I wonder if I could ask each of you, starting with you, Secretary Chao, to talk about, with risk of oversimplifying things, leadership. There are leadership qualities that apply both to government and to the private sector that these students probably ought to focus on.
Well, I would turn the question a little bit differently. I would say that leadership can be learned. When I was younger, I always thought, leaders are born. And leadership can be learned. So I think it's really important for young people to practice being a leader. And they can do so in a very low-risk way by volunteering with an agency or with a cause that they feel strongly about. And they can learn communication skills, and they can learn all about leadership skills as well. Having said that, I think a great quality for leaders to have is a sense of integrity, that they have to be true to themselves, that they are true to those that they serve, and that there's a pureness of heart.
That's a challenge, though. Sometimes when your own personal integrity is up against a brick wall of something that seems to be testing that. Hold true to it?
I hope not. I don't know. There are very few times when most of us are put in that situation, I am very glad to say. But when that situation does come, I think it's really important to know who you are, what you stand for, your own values, and be strong enough to stand up for them.
I think Ann may be a little too influenced by Frank Underwood because she knows that House of Cards is coming back in 3 weeks. So she gets to see the fictional dark underside.
Oh, you may have started Netflix and online streaming and all that, those red envelopes that used to come in.
Yes.
But he's also the godfather of President Francis Underwood of House of Cards.
Don't lay that at my feet. I would say, back to your question on leadership, it's about being the best person you can be. And you could think of it as there's two types of people in the world. There's the people who pick up the trash when they see it lying on the floor, and there's the people who walk by. And if you want to be a leader, you have to be the first type of person.
That's a great answer. One more quick question before we start with those that have come in. The idea of success in life is obviously everything that students want to aspire for, all of us want to aspire to. But can you learn from setbacks?
Absolutely.
And
those
Secretary,
are the best learning experiences.
Give us
agree with Reed.
They're the hardest.
They're the hardest, but you learn the most. Don't you agree?
I do.
You said before that you have to be ready to fail. And I think the hardest periods in your life are the times that you will experience the greatest personal growth. And so I think for those, everyone, for those who are thinking about this, all of us encounter difficulties in life. And we have to have the strength to be able to prevail and have confidence in ourselves, but also know that this is a time when we are really being tested and being made, our character and who we are.
it's hard, though.
It's very hard. And of course, if I didn't have to do it, I wouldn't do it. But those times, don't you think that those times when you had the most difficulties, that's when I've learned the most.
Reed Hastings, I think probably 95% of people have never heard of Quickster. But your company had what some called a death spiral, and look at you now. Was that a key learning experience for you?
Yeah, that was a major experience about 6 years ago, and Netflix was splitting the DVD and streaming businesses apart. And we made a big mistake. And the customers went from loving us to hating us pretty quickly. And it took us many years to earn back the trust. And out of that, we really learned a lot about listening to the customers. Even if we saw something that was a long-term strategy, it's just going a little bit slower and bringing customers along with us. It's also what made me realize I could never do electoral politics, because I just don't have the ear for it. And so I'm really built for business, and I encourage people to really think about, what they're good at. And, for myself, I realize I'm good at business, so I'm happy paying my taxes and volunteering some and being very thankful for the public servants amongst us.
All of our mothers probably tell us, when you make a mistake, apologize. Is that a good business strategy?
Generally, yes. But I would say, to be frank, the customers don't care that much. They want the thing fixed. The apology is okay, but if you think the apology itself is going to make a big difference, that there's deeper issues.
I'm Asian American. I always apologize.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a few questions, and I'm going to start with a Peace Corps volunteer in Tonga. Atkins Trout has a question for Reed Hastings. Let us please go to the question from Tonga. Here is Atkins
that looks
Trout.
great.
Malawilele. Hi, my name is Atkins Trout, and I'm a Peace Corps volunteer here in Tonga. I work in the education sector, and my question today is for Reed Hastings. In a world where the gap between the rich and the poor is rapidly widening every day, what do you think are some of the ways that service work can be useful in helping privileged people in the developed world better understand their peers in the developing world? Thanks.
Well, in the worldwide basis, actually inequality has sharply declined over the last 30 years. We've got many, many fewer on a global basis in poverty than we've ever had, thanks to the benefits of trade, and of all of the international work that everyone is doing. But to get to the question, which is how do you create more empathy and awareness, some of that is definitely through entertainment. Some of our shows, like 3% coming out of Brazil, is an amazing show about elites and the meritocracy, and very insightful. Another of our shows, Orange is the New Black, is set here in the US, but it's a sector of the population that very few people have exposure to, women in prison. So often entertainment is really what opens people's hearts and gets them to connect in what we're doing.
Wonderful. We have a question from the University of Hawaii for Secretary Chao. Victoria, Cuba. We have that question coming.
My name is Victoria Cuba. I am a junior at the University of Hawaii at Manoa studying journalism and digital media. My question is for Secretary Chao. As the first Asian American woman to be appointed to the President's cabinet and as a former director of the Peace Corps, what is the one inspirational thing you would like to share with other women of minority looking to serve others?
Have confidence in yourself. Don't be afraid. Explore. When I was growing up, I knew so little about, mainstream America. But I had wonderful parents, a wonderful family, and they imbued within me a tremendous gift. And as I mentioned earlier, that was the gift of curiosity. My parents, sacrificed so much to bring us to America. And even though they could not envision what futures lie ahead of their 6 daughters, there were 6 of us, they were confident that this country will offer them opportunities that they cannot imagine, but that they knew existed.
You were the eldest of 6 daughters, as
Yes.
I recall. Does the eldest have a special responsibility or get special pressure?
As Asian American families, I'm the one in charge, and I take care of everybody. I don't know whether my sisters will all agree that I'm the one in charge, but I do take care of everybody.
We'll do one more question from the University of Hawaii. This one is for Reed Hastings, and the question comes from a student, Tyler Gentile.
Aloha, my name is Tyler Gentile. I'm a senior at the University of Hawaii at Manoa studying communications. My question is for Mr. Hastings. How does your experience abroad in the Peace Corps attribute to your success as an entrepreneur?
I think the experience abroad has helped me tremendously in terms of empathy and connecting with people that you didn't grow up with. And fundamentally in business and communications, it's trying to get out of your own skin and to understand how a message might be received as opposed to just what you're saying. And so you get a lot of practice of that being a high school math teacher in rural Swaziland.
I would like to open up the floor now to questions from the audience here in Washington as well. I see a couple of hands going up, 2 or 3 over here, and we have a microphone coming down Good evening. Thank you for joining us, and speak right up.
Yes, good evening. I have a short question for Secretary Chao and for Mr. Hastings. Secretary Chao, you mentioned public-private partnerships. Would you be open to them in passenger rail as well? And to Mr. Hastings, do you see there being, I guess, some 2 or 3 skills that you took from being that math teacher in Swaziland that you say you use every day in your current work?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear the question. Would I be open to what?
Public-private partnerships in passenger rail, like long-distance passenger trains and the like.
I think that would be very interesting to explore.
Great, thank you.
And the skills, I think, are really what you learn in teaching is classroom management, public speaking. Some of those skills are some of the most useful.
Public speaking, get that, students? I don't see a microphone on this. Oh, yes, please go find someone over here, and we'll get a microphone to the next question over here.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Madam Secretary, Mr. Hastings, for coming to speak. My question is about if you think that there is a trend in public service towards or for the privileged. And to give some context why I'm asking this question is we see, on Capitol Hill, many internships are, they don't offer a stipend, let alone like a metro stipend. And even within the federal government, if you try to apply for an internship, many of those do not offer any kind of assistance or even a metro stipend. And so my question is, Madam Secretary, you had mentioned in the Peace Corps that there are barriers because some people cannot, work for free, especially full-time hours. And so what are your thoughts on this and how can we fix it? Because obviously from both of you speaking that public service is very important, but there are economic barriers, and it kind of sounds like we've given some people, the vehicle and the key, but there's no actual gas in the car to, do public service. So.
It's a practical question.
I'm not so negative. I really think this country has incredible opportunities. And what I encourage in young people and in parents is to believe in the goodness of this country and to be resourceful and find different ways to have different experiences. I think there are very few people like myself who came to this country with very, very little. But I was armed with the most wealthy of assets, and that is a sense of who I am. And I was also fortified by the love of my family. Armed with those 2 tremendous treasures, that gave me the courage to go out and explore and do all sorts of things. So I was on scholarship during my years in college. And then as our family situation got better, I gave the scholarship back, and now my family establishes scholarships for others. So I think the most important thing I would say is never give up, because there's so many philanthropic organizations in this country. I was head of United Way, I was director of the Peace Corps. When I was head of United Way, I never felt that I was begging anyone for money. I felt that I was giving them an opportunity to participate in the ground floor on something bigger than themselves, more important than themselves. There's so many generous benefactors who want to help, and so there are many ways and to connect those in need with those who want to give. And that's part of the function of the social sector, the volunteer sector. So I just really encourage people, number one, not be afraid. Because when I first came to America, if I can say something to the young Elaine Chao, it would be, don't be afraid. There are so many people who want to be of help. So gird yourself, find what you love to do, and go out and help find others who can help make that happen.
Could you add to that, Reed, about how
I think that was a great
if you don't have the
answer.
resources, how do you go find them?
I don't have anything to add to that one.
Okay. We have a microphone right here. I'll get to you shortly. Yes. Can you stand and thank you.
Hi, thank you for this informative panel. My name is Contessa Bourbon from the New York Times. I'd like to ask the panelists, how do you make Peace Corps relevant in view of extremism and terrorism? Has Peace Corps withdrawn from other countries that are involved in extremism?
I believe the acting Peace Corps director is here. I hope to see her. I have not seen her yet. But Peace Corps is in so many different countries.
Oh,
yeah,
please
you should
stand.
get up and answer this question.
Stand. Thank you for being here.
Peace Corps is involved in so many different countries, and I think in an international world in which we are in, Peace Corps volunteers who understand other cultures, who understand America, can be great bridges of understanding in an increasingly complicated international world.
Good. Find her afterward. We have another microphone. Yes, right here. Please stand.
Hi, my name is Liz, and I was inspired by my Peace Corps service in Morocco to start something called Corps Africa, which is Peace Corps for Africa. And they are so proud to be, they're inspired by Americans, but they love their countries. And I would be so honored to pass along your advice to them as they try to create a service, a culture of service in their own countries.
Thank you.
They're asking for advice. I think what you're doing is great, and it's emblematic of what one of the impacts of the Peace Corps is, which is changing the volunteers so that when they come back to the U.S., that they're a voice for all of these kinds of efforts. So it's great. Thank you.
We have a microphone over here, and then I promise I'll get it down here to you. Yes, thank you.
Hi, Secretary Chao. My name is Chen Chu. I'm very proud of you as an Asian American to serve our country for so many years. Thank you for doing that. I brought my daughter, 13 years old, to get inspired. I myself came to the country 22 years ago, and I went to through a leadership program in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I found very few immigrant, first generation, that's how I call myself, to be in those leadership program and offer to do certain level of public service. And I still find myself, right now I dedicate myself to, I run a small business, but try to encourage community to participate more in the social and political activity in the United States, to be 100% American. But I found myself very challenging to change the mentality of people like me to be fully participate in the society, because they always say, hey, you know, maybe my language or maybe my culture is not fully adapted to the country. So what is your suggestion to the first generation Americans like myself to be able to fully participate in the American life? Thank you.
You know, I understand their plight very well, because when you're first generation, I'm first generation, you worry about survival. You just want to have financial security. So for a lot of these first generation, their first priority is to be able to be financially secure and take care of their families. I am confident that as their financial situation gets better, they will become more and more integrated and take a larger role in mainstream America. I think as their children becomes better assimilated, that they would take a larger and larger role. So I compliment you for your efforts. I want you to kind of continue, because I think it's important, and I have faith and hope that as people get more financially secure, they are turning out. But then in the meantime, I ask them also to get involved in their local communities. So for my parents, my mother didn't speak English. They were very active in the Chinese American community, and I thought that was important as well.
Thank you for that question. We have one over web. Hi.
Hello. I have a question for Secretary Chao. You mentioned that when you were head of the Peace Corps, you wanted to bring the diversity of America into the Corps, such as recruiting people from different ethnicities, perhaps from different economic statuses as well. What about the diversity of age? Lillian Carter, of course, was famous for going to India when she was in her late 60s. How common is that? And of course, there's lifelong learning, but there's also lifelong teaching. And many of our mature, older people do have the time to volunteer for the Peace Corps.
Sounds like we've got a new volunteer.
I think that's a great observation. And I think Peace Corps, and again, the acting Peace Corps director is here. Peace Corps has always had a certain percentage of more mature citizens. But I will point out that Peace Corps volunteers work in very, very difficult positions. And so in some of these localities, the health needs of someone who's more mature becomes more important. And the remote areas of Peace Corps volunteers are assigned, and sometimes the lengthier access to healthcare facilities could be a factor in recruiting more of more mature Americans.
I don't know what the current numbers are. I expect during your tenure...
It's hay fever, not the cold.
During your tenure, the number of retirees or senior Americans who had the time to devote for that was a small percentage of the...
It was about 10% usually.
Could I ask the acting Peace Corps director?
Yes.
Okay, I'm itching to throw out some stats here. So good evening, my name is Sheila Crowley, I'm the acting director for Peace Corps. And a couple of points on the diversity. I just want to point out that we have made amazing strides in representing the face of America, and 36% of our applicants are now represent as ethnically diverse, and what we call our onboard strength, meaning the volunteers in the field, is about 28%, up from 14% since 2010. So we're making really great strides, and we have good strategies, and it's working. In terms of age diversity, which we also recognize as a need, it's only about 7% of 50 plus. But we have a program for both called Peace Corps Response, where our short-term targeted project-based assignments that are sort of tailored to people with experience, and generally those are older folks. So we are very open and welcoming to people who are 50 plus.
Let me ask you two quick follow-ups. When you talk about a short-term targeted program, that might be very, very attractive to somebody who's just about to, to retire from the workforce but doesn't want to sit home. Are you talking about 2 or 3 weeks, 5 or 6 months, or does each project have a different character?
So it depends on the project and the country and the need, but 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And then actually, I do just want to point out that I think our oldest serving volunteer just left Morocco. She's 85 years old.
Wow.
Awesome.
Pretty amazing. And I was a country director, and my oldest volunteer was 80. So, and that also sends a powerful message to our partners in the field that you're never too old or young to serve.
And may I ask you one other question, which had come in, which had come in from a Hawaii student, asking what can you say to minorities and non-traditional volunteers to encourage them to go ahead and explore the possibility of a Peace Corps service?
So the first thing I would say is talk to a recruiter. And we have recruiters around the United States. But the other thing I would say is, I think in the past, Peace Corps would often be sort of viewed as something that you sort of did after college to get away and to have a great experience, but you were really putting your career on hold. I think Peace Corps now is a career accelerator. It always has been, but we've really sort of, in the 21st century, with the internet and all the different projects that volunteers are doing, there's incredible benefits in terms of leadership development, flexibility, adaptability, all the things that were mentioned. And then we have benefits. We have a scholarship program that returned Peace Corps volunteers can apply to for graduate school after Peace Corps. It's called the Fellows Program. And then we also have a readjustment allowance that helps them get started when they re-enter the United States. So we have lots of benefits that would serve them.
Thank you very much for I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Yes, you've been very patient waiting. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. Glenn Blumhorst, president of National Peace Corps Association, and I served in the Peace Corps in Guatemala, 1988 to 91. Secretary Chao, thank you for your decades of public service and national service, and Reed for your service in the Peace Corps and elsewhere. And you are very inspiring, and this is certainly an evening of inspiration for service. Matter of fact, thanks to the great recruitment process that Peace Corps has now, over 20,000, sometimes close to 25,000 individuals are applying to serve in the Peace Corps. But with funding for only 7,000 volunteers at any given time, thousands of individuals, American citizens, young global citizens, young citizens who would like to serve in the Peace Corps don't have that opportunity. What can we do about that? And the question is for either or both of you. How can we ensure that those Americans have the opportunity to serve?
Well, I think what's been amazing about the Peace Corps is it's varied. I have the numbers approximately from 2,500 to 5,000 down to 4. I didn't know it was up to 7 now, and that it's been over 50 years, quite a stable program. So I'm not sure, you wouldn't want to grow it too quickly. I think you might see a whole number of side effects of that. And on balance, it's been incredible bipartisan support in good and bad budget times. The funding's been really reliable compared to many federal programs. And so I think we should also just be positive about what we've got in Peace Corps for the budget.
Can I just go back to the question that one of the previous questioners asked? I think it's also important, again, speaking from an Asian American perspective, you know, for us, I think it's really important that we help our parents, and I say this to young people, their parents may not understand what Peace Corps is all about. So for these young people who, at least in the Asian American community, you have to kind of convince your parents that this is a good path forward. And so I would encourage young people to kind of explain what Peace Corps is as they make this decision, you know, to those around them so that they understand and will support that decision.
As a moderator, I'm going to take the opportunity to not ask the last question. We have one more videotaped question from a Peace Corps volunteer who is in Guatemala. And let me introduce now Susana Gonzalez.
Hello, my name is Susana Gonzalez. I'm a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala working on youth development. My question is for both Secretary Chao and Mr. Hastings. How do we make opportunities to serve in organizations such as the Peace Corps more accessible to those who come from disadvantaged communities in the States?
Well, we have touched on this, but let me give both of you a chance to sum up your thoughts. I love the fact that she's on a rooftop with the horns, with the dogs barking, and the true Peace Corps experience. If you could sum up how you think the skills that you have been able to learn from not only the leadership but in business would translate into bringing some of those less traditional volunteers into this. Start with you, Secretary Chao.
I think Reed needs to answer this because Reed is so extraordinarily successful, and people don't think about the transition from Peace Corps into the business sector. So I think you would have a lot of encouragement to offer.
Yeah, in answering our volunteers' question, the Peace Corps in the last 10 or 15 years has made a big effort in terms of diversifying, and you heard some of the numbers. And so I really think we're on the right course. You know, it's finding great role models where, you know, it's not just white men and white women, you know, talking about how great the Peace Corps was, because people, you know, follow the role models that they see. And so as we have more volunteers like Susanna, I think it's natural that it's spreading, and so I think it's a really big success.
Last word? The life skills that Peace Corps volunteers learn is very helpful and very applicable to all aspects of life and also in any chosen occupation or career. The qualities of flexibility, curiosity, and being resourceful. I mean, these Peace Corps volunteers are thrown into pretty interesting and unexpected circumstances and situations, and they have to learn how to adjust and be problem solvers.
Are we going to get you back as a second-term Peace Corps director? You have such passion for it.
I'll go back as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Volunteer next, okay.
Thanks to the internet world, we live in a world where we all think we know much more about the world than we used to, but there's nothing like boots on the ground and living within another culture to not only appreciate what they are going through, but what the United States has in terms of values, standards, business practices, and human-to-human contact that really makes it exceptional. Thank you so much, Secretary Elaine Chao, Reed Hastings of Netflix, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. What a wonderful panel. We're deeply grateful to Secretary Chao and Reed Hastings. They came a long way to be here tonight, and we're grateful to Ann Compton also. We're always grateful to Mrs. Inouye and the Daniel K. Inouye Institute, and we're so happy that we had the students in Hawaii on the 2 campuses and the many Peace Corps volunteers around the world. We couldn't see all of you, but we felt your service and your idealism and were inspired by you. The Kluge Center and the Inouye Institute will be putting forth 2 more programs in this series over the next 2 years. Please stay in touch with us via email or social media. Consult our website. And once again, thank you so much for coming out. Good night.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.